You can interrupt anytime.
Okay.
Then you don't have to let stuff go so long on the question if you want to.
Like when you're going full explanation, I try not
to. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But you can probably do more of it, or if you want, do one of these, and then I'll cut it to do that.
That'll work. Yeah.
Cool.
I don't want to like keep interrupting you every time.
Yeah. Then just give me instead of me wondering, then you can just give me the.
Cool.
What is going on? Shock Therapy back in the house. We got live, baby. Reported to you from Shock Therapy, and everyone has already been prepped and should know what we're talking about today. It's kind of a soft subject. It's actually a rubbery type subject. I think we're talking about wheels and tires.
We are now. Why are we, a shock company, tuning company, talking about wheels and tires? Well, it's because that is what's going to contact the road and basically tell you what our shock work is doing. Wheels and tires can be a good thing, they can be a bad thing, and we get these questions a lot as to what people should run and also why they should run it. So funnel those questions that you guys might have as we're talking, and we'll get to them as much as we possibly can. But some of the main things that people should be concerned with, and we actually touched upon this about 5 years ago. We wrote an article having to do with wheel scrub, scrub radius, and how it affects feedback in the steering wheel and also longevity of parts in the front end. You guys can go to our website and go to the articles tab, and under that articles tab, you'll see a full, we're talking 10-pager on how wheel scrub works, but I'm going to touch upon that as quickly as I can so it doesn't become boring. Hopefully Chase can pep things up because I get too long-winded when it comes to details and math, and we know that's not that much fun to watch. But so on the magic chalkboard over here, what we've got is we're looking at a cutaway of a wheel and a tire from the front of the car, looking roughly at what a UTV would be. Upper control arm shock, lower control arm, my version of a crappy spindle, hub, brake caliper, front of the wheel, overall section of the wheel, bells and tire, and the ground. When we talk about scrub radius, what that actually is if you follow the center line of the tire where it contacts the ground, and you draw an imaginary line through the upper control arm pivot point at the spindle or ball joint, lower ball joint, that imaginary line all the way to the ground, the distance between these 2 points is scrub radius. Scrub radius is the biggest effector in a negative way to feedback in the steering wheel and wearing out most steering components on UTVs. It also affects how the shock works and how you perceive the car to ride. So most wheel offsets for UTVs are a high offset, which would be very little wheel on the outside of the hub face and most of the wheel on the inside of that hub face. What we try to keep in most of the factory wheel and tire combinations on UTVs have a scrub radius that's under 1/2 inch. The less scrub radius you have, the less feedback is in the wheel. The more scrub radius that you have, exponentially, the more feedback you're going to get in the wheel, steering wheel, when I say that. So if you try to keep the scrub radius very close to the way the stock was, you're always going to have the best possible setup. As you start going with taller tires, you can actually run the wheel a little bit wider and still not affect that. But in general, try to stay as close to stock as you can, and even if you do make changes, then you're going to want to stay well under 1 inch of scrub radius. Now, what are some of the common wheel offsets that people run into that are negatives and positives? Well, again, since we want to minimize this scrub radius, if you take a wheel and you run an offset that's farther out or a wider system, you're basically shifting the tire over, shifting the center line of the tire over and increasing scrub radius and making this feedback worse. Another way to look at this is consider if you've ever had your car in the driveway or in the garage and you haven't moved it, but you've taken the wheel and turned it all the way back and forth. The mark that tire leaves on the ground is showing you what your scrub radius is. If that pivot point comes down to the center of the tire and you turn the tire, it's going to pivot on the center line of the tire and leave a perfect round little spot on the ground where the tire is moved around or scrubbed. If that pivot point, kingpin inclination angle, is inside or the tire is moved out and you've got, say, a scrub radius of about 2 inches, when you turn the tire, it actually turns the tire around that pivot point, leaving a half moon or a circle of rubber on the ground. Understanding that is important because the farther out you push that tire away from this kingpin angle, the more leverage when you hit a rock that tire has to try and turn around that point, and that comes right into the wheel every time you feel something. If that kingpin inclination angle is right about center line and you have a very small amount of scrub radius, the tire doesn't have leverage against the system, it merely just pivots on it. So when you hit a rock, it goes straight over and doesn't kick around and you don't have feedback. That's important to understand, especially when we talk about shocks, because usually when someone rides their car after they've done a set of wheels and tires and they've got a wheel offset that's not correct, they call us and they go, "This thing really feels horrible. I got a ton of feedback in the wheel. It's chattery. The car's bouncing around. Feels like it's rock hard in all the chop." 99% of the time, that's because the wheel offset's wrong and that feedback's coming through the wheel, through the chassis, and in the car. Most people don't believe us until they put their stock wheels and tires back on it and all the problems go away. So that's the technicality when it comes to scrub radius. I'll touch a little bit on offset. So this picture right here, we're looking at a cutaway of a wheel just like we have it above us. This is the wheel bells. This is the center of the wheel. If we were to cut it in half, the tire would be on the bottom, right? The way the industry measures offset is a 0 offset wheel is the center of this wheel, which, look below you, Chase. This would be the hub portion of the wheel, the back of this, is centered in the wheel. That's a 0 offset wheel. A lot of times you'll see people measuring these with a 13 millimeter offset or a plus 13 or a plus 38. You can equate those two. A plus 13 would be pushing the center line outward, which brings the wheel inward. That would be equal to a 4-3 offset wheel. You get a plus 38, that's more offset even more, less wheel on the outside, more wheel on the inside, that's equal to a 5-2. Most UTVs, rule of thumb, especially XP1000, X3, and larger or performance UTVs, you're going to want to have no less, or you're not going to want to have a wheel offset worse than a 5.2. A 5.1 is even better. A 6.1 is fine. A 4.1 is great. But 5.2 is about your max. 4.3s, not good on XPs, X3s. Now XP 900, you can put a 4.3 on. The geometry is different. It'll accept that. Some of the smaller trail models, you can run a 4.3. But any of the big stuff, XP 1000s turbos and Can-Ams and bigger, you're going to want 5.2 max, 6.1, 4.1, 5.1 preferably. And that also works between a 30 and a 35-inch tire range. All right, what do you got, Mitch?
Got Baker_Connor says, does the same go for wheels and paddles at the dunes?
It does. Well, let me give you a couple of places where this works and where this doesn't. Everything I'm talking about for feedback is strictly related to the steering, which is the front of the car. You can do any wheel offset you want on the back, and it's not going to give you any steering feedback, good or bad. But the main place where the wrong wheel offset is a problem is when you hit rocks, shelves, something sharp that's a snap in the wheel. Okay, in the dunes, you don't have any rocks. The whoops are round. Everything, the terrain that you're running on is very smooth. So you could run a 4.3, you can run a wider offset on that and not feel all the negatives from sharp objects because there aren't any in the dunes. But what you will feel is the steering will want to steer for you because you have so much on the outside adding to the pivot. That's about the only place that we would say we don't really care what you run for offset in the front, but you will have next to no feedback at all in the dunes if you have the right offset. We don't run a 5.1 on our sand tires in the front. We've run 4.4s, 4.3s. It's really not that big a deal, but it is noticeable in the steering. Never run that offset in the dirt. Too many rocks, too many sharp things that are definitely going to be a problem. More questions?
Yep, I got L_Nando Feely X3 says, is 15-inch 4x4 bad for an X3?
Absolutely. So when you said 4+4 on an X3, that's basically a center offset wheel. That's a ton of wheel on the outside, and it's actually equal, 4 inches on the outside and 4 inches on the inside. That's horrible. We want you to get back into the 5.2 range where it actually is not going to have that feedback. 4.4s on an X3, you're going to have the wheel almost rip out of your hand when you hit stuff like rocks and whoops.
Got a quick comment here. BHawk568 says, thank you for the videos. Learning a lot in the past few days. Y'all rock.
Thank you very much, man. Hey, we're glad to do it, and tell your friends or anybody else that wants to watch this stuff. We're going to do this for at least 2 weeks and make a decision after that if we can keep going or if we have more subjects that you guys give us that we can talk about.
This is pretty crazy, Justin. That whole time I thought Offset was just a rapper from Migos, and you're telling me that there's a whole calculated formula for wheels, for suspension, that all this has to go with one another.
You mean there's more to it than rap? Yes, Chase, there definitely is. Sorry to ruin your...
I've always just gone with the more offset, the better. You know what I mean? The bigger, the better. Spinners. I want to be able to put like a hamster on the side of my wheel.
Hey, look, if you want a hamster and a spinner, you can do that, but you better be ready for the negatives that come with the way that thing drives. You also better be ready to destroy rack and pinions, tie rods, ball joints, and control arm pivot points. They're going to get worn out, and that's just part of dealing with the offset that sits out too far like a lot of guys run. Let me show you really quick on this wheel. So this is a Method 401R. It's a B-lock wheel. I'm going to remove the B-lock just to make it a little easier for me. Now, we actually race this wheel, and Method builds some of the nicest stuff on the market. The load ratings on all the Method wheels are about 1,600 pounds, where a lot of the other manufacturers are 400 to 800. So there's a big difference between the strength of all this stuff. We're obviously a Method fan. We're also a Tensor fan, but just to show you where an easy way to measure wheel offset. You always butt the tape up against the inside mounting surface of the hub, and you are basically measuring out to this outside lip. Move my finger. This lip coming in, technically right at the roll, that's your measurement. This is a 4-inch inset with, remember, we're not going to the outside of the wheel right here. We're going to the inside again with a 1-inch outset. This is a 4-1 wheel. So earlier someone asked about a 4-4. That would mean that you had 4 inches of wheel sitting out here and 4 inches on the inside. That would be horrible for steering.
We got Tommy Wilson 760 asking, do you run the same offset front and back?
So we always do. We always run the same offset front to rear, mainly so that we have one spare and it fits everything on the car. There is no negative to running a wider wheel in the back. There's definitely a negative to running a wider wheel in the front. So I would prefer that everything is the same. It's not going to affect the back if it's narrower. So just get the thing to actually work right with the right wheel offset and run it all the way around.
Cool. Yeah, with that, Jace Mazing, is there a 5+1 wheel 15-inch that is light, that is not a bead lock?
Absolutely. If you check with Method, you're going to find about 10 different wheel styles that are in that offset. Not just to stick with Method, although they are our favorite, and I think they build the best wheel. There's Raceline, Fuel, and a couple other guys that will have that. But be careful when you're dealing with other wheel manufacturers, because a lot of times they're going to send you a wheel. You might order a 5.2 and you get the tape measure out and you check that yourself, you'll find that it might be a 4.3. And I don't know that they're doing it on purpose, but we see that a lot. So make sure you check it. Make sure that you verify it actually is a 5.2 or a 4.1 or whatever it is you actually ordered. If you get it from Method, guaranteed it's going to come the right offset.
Big shout out to Mitch. I think he's got a pretty cool name on it. Said, definitely keep videos going. Videos help me decide to order springs this week from you guys. They get here on Friday. I can't wait.
That was from Mitch?
Yeah.
Awesome.
I was going to say, I thought that first comment was planted.
Good job, Mitch. Thank you very much. We're just trying to inform people as much as we can. I'm glad that it helped you with your decision as well. Mitch, when you do questions, then yell it out a little louder for
sorry.
the mic.
Chase stinks a little bit though. So.
Well, we all know that.
Stay the 6 feet away from me.
Yeah. I got a couple more good questions here, Justin. One from Elp Square. How much does the bump steer delete help with the feedback?
Okay, so bump steer delete specifically on a Can-Am. A lot of Can-Ams have this issue. Not all of them do. We try to actually push people to measure how much bump steer they have before they do the kit. But if you want to compare feedback in the wheel to wheel offset, so first I'll tell you that the bump steer delete will get rid of 80% of the feedback in a Can-Am that's relative to the toe change. It won't get rid of all of the feedback when you're in whoops with a factory rack and pinion, because the factory rack and pinion can bind up a little bit, and that comes in the wheel with a little bit of feedback. But when you do the wrong wheel offset on the front of a Can-Am, you'll have 10 times the amount of feedback that just bump steer gives you. So our BSD will cure the feedback from bump steer. It will not cure the feedback from the wrong wheel and tire. You want to walk?
I was looking for if we had BSD over there.
I don't think that we do.
I thought I had some in the drawer.
We might have one on a car over there, though, if you want to make your way over. Yeah, actually, I think that he's got, this is a Lone Star kit, so it doesn't have our tie rod on it to show you on a BSD. But if you take a look at the wheel, this is a set of wheels that we actually made for this car, but you can see the offset. You're looking at 1 inch on the outside and 5 inches on the inside. That's an accurate offset. Now, in this shop car with a stock steering rack, there was virtually no feedback. When we did our billet rack on this car, there's 0 feedback in the car. But when it comes to wheel offset, it's super important. Otherwise, you're going to get a lot.
I got Justin Para 55. What is the largest offset you can go with 33-inch tires on a Turbo S?
I would do 5.2. I would not do a 4.3. That's too much. So stay with a 5.2 or less. Behind you, you can see a brand new XP Pro 4-seater. This one has long travel on it, and we just did the suspension package as far as tuning is concerned. He's got a 33-inch tire, and if you look at that wheel, you can see that is the wrong wheel offset. That is a 4.3. So this car is going to have a ton of feedback in the steering, and we've already told the owner about it. He's going to run this setup for a little bit, and then he's going to change the wheels and tires so we can eliminate that front end feedback.
But it looks so cool.
And that's what he said. He's like, man, I love the dish, and that's what everybody wants. I get it. You know, it looks cool. But the negatives are really, really bad, and we would seriously recommend people don't do that.
I saw something really cool over here. Look at it. Cool.
A pallet of wheels and tires. So, you know, we don't sell wheels and tires, but we buy them for our own stuff here and there, walkers, methods. So this particular walker right here, that's a 4.3 offset. That is not a good offset for any of the bigger cars, but it's the perfect offset for an XP 900, which is what this wheel is going on, is an XP 900. Try to ignore everything I said about a 4.3 being good unless you have a 900. On anything big, don't run that. So,
Justin, real quick, I got a question from Ride Easy actually about the 33-inch Tensors.
Yep.
Says, can you give a detailed comparison between the Tensor DS33 and the previous DS32 model?
Yes. So let's take a look at this tire since we're talking about it real quick, Chase. So a DS32 is a different tread pattern. As a matter of fact, let's just look at this. This is the new 33. It's the same tread pattern that's on the 35. Overall construction of the tire is very similar between them. Let's walk over here to, let's say, either our Honda or our Kawasaki. Okay, both of these cars have the DS tire on it with a ton of miles. These have probably got 2,000 pre-run miles in Baja, ton of testing time. That's the DS tread. Construction is the same. So I would say the difference between the two, I can't get very detailed other than it's mainly a tread and overall size difference. Both tires have the side rib protection. You see these ribs? These do multiple things. These are rock deflectors. And if you feel these, since you've got a lot of miles on these are really chewed up from having rocks slide off the sidewall when you drive over them. That protects you from sidewall pinches, sidewall slices and rocks. When you get into sand, these are actually traction ribs. Sand will sit up this high and you get a lot more traction out of this. This design is specific to Tensor. It's going to be the same on the DS or on the new 33. Now, we have DSs on our cars. We've been racing that tire. We now have converted everything that we're racing to the 33. I prefer it from a traction standpoint. We always want the height when it comes to our race car. But when it comes to tire selection for play cars, I would say 32, 33 max. Not a fan of putting 35s on these things because it's a lot of rotating weight and it really runs the leverage ratios up. And you'll see front control arm bushings, axles, differentials, driveline failures. A lot of that happens instantly when you put 35s on a car, so I would suggest not doing that, but staying 32, 33 max.
I got a quick one from
Louder.
Left R23. Just ordered message for my X3 for the sand, 4.3 fronts and 5.5 rears. Did I order them correctly?
If that is for the sand, you are fine. Run that. If that is for the dirt, no, you don't want to do that. A 5.5 is the worst. A 4.3 is not as bad. But again, in the sand, you can get away with that stuff because you don't have rocks and sharp stuff to kick back into the wheel. So sand tires, yes, go ahead and run that offset. You're fine.
Alex Seed says, what's the offset mean if it only says 13 millimeter?
13 millimeter, back to the drawing on the board earlier, plus 13 would mean that it's a 4.3. So bad for anything on the front. If it said plus 38 or plus 36 in that range, that would be a 5.2.
Chase, real quick, while we're looking at this, the Razor here, the Frosted Razor 1.0 asks, on my Razor, stock Razor XP4 1000, the top springs are fully compressed. Is that normal or can I adjust it? Okay, so in bone stock form, if you still have the stock springs, that's normal. The reason, everybody asks us why they do that, why the factory does that. An upper spring completely bound like that is how they are able to pass the rollover test with the government. Rollover test. So you go to a government test facility, Polaris does, and they run the car the way they're going to sell it on asphalt at 25 miles an hour. 25 miles an hour, they grab the wheel and crank full lock into it, into a corner. There you go, on asphalt. If that car picks up one inside tire, like the back rear, it fails. So what they do to pass that test is they run a spring that's almost compressed all the way to begin with. So the second they turn into a corner, it's smashed, they're into a stiff rate, they pass the test. It also means that we get to pay for it with ride quality. It doesn't ride very good. So on your car, you're gonna be able to adjust it by cranking the preload down. It is not gonna fix that spring. It's not gonna give you much more ride height. If you take preload out of it, it's not gonna allow the spring to get bigger. It's just gonna lower the car. So you're kind of stuck, and that's why we sell spring kits, because there's really no way around that one.
Hey, you guys, I got an idea. We're going to answer some questions here, Mitchy boy, so I want you to start thinking about those. But this is just a normal, average day here at the shop, and we got some people wondering about when they could bring their cars in. So Justin, why don't we talk about some of the wheels on the cars here in the shop? Are these the right wheel sets?
So for the most part, what you're looking at are the wrong wheel offsets. On a Polaris, that's a 4.3. Not good. On this Polaris, that's a 4.3, not good. On this Can-Am, that is a 4.3 fuel wheel, not good. Also, another thing to bring up when it comes to tire choice, you guys, that a square tire, like say for instance, this one's fairly square, sharp edges. Also, not so much this one, but compare this square system to a rounded mounting system like these Harrisons have a lot more crown to them. The rounder the tire, the better that drives as far as steering input is concerned. The more square, like this one over here, Chase, the more square the tire is, the more feedback you get. Because if you hit a rock on this corner, that's a lot of leverage to turn the car. If this was rounded, you'd hit that rock and it'd glance off. So from a steering standpoint, then rounder is better than square. This offset on this one, I think, is a 5.2. So that's a better offset than this one here, which is a 4.3.
Everyone's always called me a square, so I think that's a good thing.
You fit right in around here, that's for sure.
This is actually a really good question too, Justin. From Ryan Heather Sloan, what offset should you run on a stock 15 1000 with your shock package done?
XP 1000, I assume. Then I would run a 5.2, or I'd run a 5.1 or a 6.1. I would not run a 4.3. Also, you said tire package too, right? So is that wheel and tire? So wheel wise?
What offset, yeah.
So wheel offset, 5.2, 5.1, 6.1. Tire, take your pick, but try to pick something that has a high load rating, has a kind of a round tread when it's mounted, and I would prefer a Tenzer in either the DS or New 33. Take a look. So take a look at the dish and the offset on these right here, Chase, and then kind of get over to the Honda and to the Cowie. And then it's real drastic and easy to see how much wheel offset are on these, especially when you look at the outside. That extra dish on the outside, Rio, okay. The extra dish on the outside is a good telltale sign that it might be a 4.3 offset. Now take a look at these. Very little or no dish on this, that's a 4.1. That's closer to the right system that you want. And you guys, I understand you want to buy a wide wheel because it looks cool and you want to buy the wheel style that you like the most. That's great, but just try and ask that person, that manufacturer of wheel, if you can get it in a 5.2. That would be something that's going to work a lot better for steering.
It's like my pants. In high school, I used to wear pants that didn't fit, and then I went to a tailor and they made pants that actually fit my size.
You're a tard, I swear. You guys, if you guys any more questions, then hit me with it right now. Otherwise, we're going to sign off and we're going to think about more things we can talk about tomorrow. We actually might have something really cool in store for you.
I got one more. I might butcher this name, I'm sorry. RDZ 287. What tires would you prefer on K&N XP Tenzer or KM3s?
I would prefer the Tenzer, but the BFGs are a great tire as well. In our testing on our race car, we've run the BFG, we've run the DS, we've run the Tenzer 33. We've run them all. I feel as though the traction in the 33 Tenzer and
Like we're working over here.
I know they're working. Hold on one second. The traction in that DS is better than the BFGs, and also they are lighter than the BFG, but they have better construction. So personally, I would prefer the Tenzer.
Big shout out to Paralyzing 99. What's up, Brian King? We see you here. Thank you for all the comments, buddy.
Somebody was asking about Ernie. I just saw him over here working on this new little project we got going.
No, this is a little off the subject, but if you want to take a look at this really quick, maybe shoot a camera underneath there. This is a Maverick that we're fitting IQS on. So take a look. You've got an electronic adjuster, wire loom, and there's a switch in the car. So doing some final fitment on some of the other models of vehicles so we don't leave anybody out.
Quick, we didn't really go over the air pressure much. I got a lot of people.
Ooh, yes, air pressure. All right.
And all that good stuff.
So 3 places that you need to consider your air pressure: sand, desert trail, and racing. In the sand with sand tires, I'm gonna ignore a street tire in the sand and just go straight to paddles. You do not want to run 6, 7, 8 pounds like you used to years in the past where people need flotation. We don't need that flotation anymore. These things are faster, have plenty of power, they'll go anywhere. You want to run between 10 and 14 pounds of air in a paddle tire. If you run less air pressure, when you come down to the bottom of a G-out and bottom the car out, you will squish the sidewall all the way down to the wheel, and you will lose all of the bottom out resistance in the bump stage of the system. In essence, you'll be dragging your skid plate when all of your travel is gone through the sidewall that disappeared, and you'll never be able to fix it. As you run more air pressure, the sidewall is stiffer, you can hit those G-outs and not bottom the car out. In the desert, we probably like to see you run between 12 and 16 PSI. In racing, you're going to see it all over the board, but somewhere between 20 and 28 pounds. The reason we run so much in racing is because 18 PSI in a tire, when you go through 3-foot whoops at 80 miles an hour, you can hit that whoop so hard, it'll collapse the sidewall and pinch the sidewall on the wheel, and you'll get flats. So more air pressure saves the wheel and gets less flats. For play though, 12 to 16 pounds. All right, what else you guys got? Otherwise, I'm going to go back to work.
Got a couple. What is our turnaround time for guys dropping off cars to have appointments done?
So we are always turning cars around the same exact day. It's always same day flip. The appointment is what's going to be your timing. Right now we're about 2 weeks out on our appointments. So for instance, if you scheduled your car for 2 weeks from Thursday, when you drop it off Thursday morning, you will pick it up Thursday afternoon.
Damn, you're looking sexy, Justin says. Sobel 333.
Oh, Cass, you're awesome.
All right, you guys. Well, that I think is going to end it for our live stream today. We're going to try to do something special for you guys tomorrow or Friday. So
You want to let the cat out of the bag on that?
Oh yeah, you can tell them a little something. I'm still doing some experimenting with this science that we call live videos. So why don't you let them know a little bit, Justin?
All right, here's what we're working on for you tomorrow. We are looking at doing a live feed from, hang on one second, Brandon. We're looking at doing a live feed from our race car on a clutch, belt, and suspension test on the test track. And we're going to be answering your questions from inside the car, in the intercom system and radio, on the fly and live. So if you guys give us your questions while we're testing the car, we will answer it while we're doing it.
Rub one con. What is the tread depth difference between 32 and 33 tensors?
I can't tell you exactly, man. I don't think there's much difference though. The 33 looks about as deep and or tall of a tread as the DS does.
All right. Well, you heard it here first, guys. Stay tuned. We'll be here tuning. And Final Jet Matt, you don't worry about the pants I was wearing in high school. They were actually Dickies. The proper answer to that question was Dickies. Alrighty. So stay tuned, you guys, and we'll be back tomorrow at the same time, maybe a different location. And if you're looking to buy any of our products, look at the website www.shocktherapist.com. And if you want to contact us directly, or if you got any more further questions, or if you want to get a hold of anyone here in the building, give us a call.
Call us at 623-217-4959 or email us at sales@shocktherapist.com.
All right, guys, stay healthy, stay safe, and stay plush.
Thank you, Mitch.
Yeah, it's tricky because there's so many different people.